2 months ago, in a small town in Alabama, Spawn met a sweet little kid by the name of Andy Frank, who helped him after an intense battle with angels in heaven. Andy and his older brother Eddie lived together with their abusive father after their mother died. Their dad was a mean drunk who beat them all the time, but little Andy took the worst beatings. One day the father took things too far and put a gun to Andy's head, so Spawn decided to step in and do something. But instead of ending the father, he tattooed something on his body, hoping that he would come to his senses and be a good father. But this only made things worse. Thinking the dad had learned his lesson, Spawn went back to New York. But the father was even angrier and took out his frustrations on Andy once again. This time he lost control and started beating him senselessly, threatening the young boy's life. Luckily, Eddie was around and took his father's gun and shot him. After that, the two brothers were orphans and were adopted by a foster care family. But things didn't work out there as well, and the two boys were locked inside a juvenile center. Eventually, they thought it would be a good idea to find Spawn once again, so they both escaped and made their way across the country to New York City. But the city was big and filled with millions of people who didn't have the best intentions. One such man, nicknamed Snake, found the two brothers and offered to be their friend. He took them inside his home and offered them food, but in return, he asked for simple favors. Andy started by delivering messages to people and quickly upgraded to delivering unmarked packages. This kind of life was easy, and Andy and his brother were quickly entangled in New York's crime life. One day the two brothers went searching for Spawn through the dark and dangerous alleys of New York City, but instead of finding who they were looking for, they ran into Cagliostro. The old man had become one of Spawn's closest friends since he came back from the dead. He pointed the two brothers in the right direction and told them to be careful. Spawn had made a throne for himself, made out of skeletons and rotten flesh from every bad guy he'd killed since he became a hellspawn. He tried to scare the two kids into running away, but the boys weren't intimidated since they knew him, though Spawn didn't recognize them. Little Andy was happy to see Spawn and hugged him, saying how happy he was to see him again. The two brothers told Spawn everything that happened, how after he went back to New York City, Eddie was forced to kill his own father to save Andy, and ever since, they had been living in foster care homes and juvenile centers. Their lives had been completely turned upside down, and since they didn't have anywhere else to go, they asked Spawn if they could live with him. But Spawn didn't care, and said they were not his problem. Eddie wanted to leave and go back to Snake and blamed Spawn for forcing him to kill his father and ruining their lives. But Andy wanted to stay, so the two brothers split up. He returned home, but Snake was angry because he didn't deliver any packages today and asked him where he'd been all day. Eddie told him about Spawn, and Snake wanted him to deliver a package to him, saying he was part of the drop. But in reality, Snake and his gang wanted to kill Spawn for interfering with their criminal operations, so they followed the young boy. Eddie led the gang members inside the dark alleys of New York streets once again, until they reached the hideout. But Spawn was missing, so Snake started interrogating one of the homeless men, but something was wrong. In just an instant, his entire crew disappeared, and he was left alone. Andy called out to Eddie from the shadows, and Snake panicked and shot into the shadows, but Spawn disappeared. Andy asked Snake to let go of his brother, but Snake panicked and shot towards him, injuring Andy. Eddie was able to push Snake from the side directly into Spawn's throne of skeletons, impaling the low-life criminal and killing him on the spot. Andy was unconscious on the ground and his brothers started to panic, but Spawn said he knew a clinic nearby that didn't ask questions, and they should be able to help him. Luckily, the bullet only slightly pierced his flesh, and in just a few hours, Andy was back on his feet again. Spawn told them to go back to Alabama and face their problems, because running away from them wouldn't solve them. Snake's soul was taken directly to hell, where he belonged, but his earthly body was now part of Spawn's throne, because this is where the new Shadow King lives.